City Center Radio. It is episode 233, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, March 8th, 2024. The Palmetto State is about to be awash in more guns. Do I have your attention? Yes, I hope you are sufficiently scared because, you know, you might have good reason to be. We'll get to that in a moment. Sorry to scare you right off the bat, but that's the top story today, which we'll be getting into in just a few moments. Before that, let's backtrack. I hope you're having a good week despite that intro to the show. I hope things have gone well, and I hope you have an amazing weekend. Speaking of, you can go to holycitycenter.com. In addition to the latest stories about restaurant openings, politics, entertainment, you can also find out what's going on in town, not just this weekend, but every day moving forward. Be sure to find some awesome plans and get out there and enjoy the weekend. It is Charleston Wine and Food Festival weekend, so some of you, I'm sure, will be attending those events. Tickets are still available for a handful of the things going on, so if you get out there, have fun, stay safe. Uber, Lyft, whatever you need to do if you're imbibing. We'll get there eventually. I'm a little tired if you can't tell. So any event, have a good time. If you drink, make sure you have someone else to drive you from your event to home and vice versa. Also, quick reminder, you can vote for Holy City Center right now in the final voting for 2024's Best of Charleston Awards through the city paper. The link is in the show notes. And with that, let's get into the big scary news I promised. All right, we don't know for sure what's going to happen, but on the surface, this is something that a lot of us have thought was a terrible idea, and it's closer to reality. As I'm talking about the so-called constitutional carry legislation that has been working its way through the State House, and now it is just Henry McMaster's signature away from becoming law. So the South Carolina Senate approved a compromise on Wednesday that allows anyone who can legally own a gun in South Carolina to carry one in public. The bill, known as the Constitutional Carry Bill, passed the Senate in a 28-18 vote. Meanwhile, the South Carolina House had approved a conference committee compromise version on Tuesday in an 86-33 vote. So House said good to go on this compromise. Senate was also on board. And there we go. And for the record, Governor Henry McMaster, who I mentioned before, has already signaled that he's going to sign this bill. As of this recording, it hasn't happened yet. My guess is that he's going to make some big show of it, do like a ceremonial bill signing and, try to tout this as one of his main accomplishments because he's been trying to do this for a long time. And he's tried to spin this as, a lot of people are like, oh, Second Amendment, it's a win for the Second Amendment. He mentions that, but he seems to think this is somehow going to help crime. And we'll get into that later. Yes, there are some enhanced penalties that didn't exist before, but it's hard to see if that's really going to offset, the potential problems that we could see from this legislation. So what exactly is in this bill? Well, it would allow adults, so anyone 18 and older, to carry loaded handguns openly, which I mentioned before. But the other side to this is they don't need a permit or any kind of training. So currently, there is required training. You have to get a permit for these things. And if you want to own a gun, no longer will that be required. So as long as you are legally allowed to carry a gun, and there's very few people who are not legally allowed to. So for instance, a felon. If someone's been convicted of a felony, they can't get a gun. But some kid turns 18, he can waltz into a shop, buy a gun, walk right on out, and start using it. He doesn't need any training, doesn't need a permit, nothing. Just has to be of legal age and, be legally allowed to carry a gun, which again, just about anybody can. Now, always the telling part of this legislation, open carry, right? Everywhere, all the time. Guns are safe. Good guys with guns. Stop bad guys with guns. This is a good thing, right? Sure, right. It's telling that guns would still be banned in some of the same places they are now. Now, this part's not telling. This is just a thank you. It's still banned at schools, so that's good, of course. But the thing that's telling is that they're banned in courthouses still, and of course, government buildings. Imagine that. The people who pass this and say guns everywhere is a great thing, everybody should have guns. This isn't going to make our community any less safe. Oh, but you can't bring your gun into this government building. Funny how that works. They don't mind guns being everywhere, but it's telling that they don't want them in their place of work because they know the truth. Now, I mentioned there's no permit or training required. However, people are still more than welcome to obtain a concealed weapons permit if they want to. There will also be free training available. So that's good that at least there will be free training available. Will people go through with it? Who knows? So it is still possible. And hopefully those so-called, good guys with guns or responsible gun owners will actually follow through and do the things that you should do when you own a deadly weapon. A couple other places as far as restrictions, uh, in addition to the ones I mentioned, schools, courthouses, and government buildings, guns will also not be allowed at polling places on election day or at daycare centers. So will be banned at those as well. Now, there's also some restrictions for bars. Again, thankfully, at least there's some restrictions in this thing. Under the bill, if a person is convicted of knowingly carrying a firearm into a business that sells alcoholic liquor, beer, or wine for consumption, so that this isn't like uh, a wine store or a package store we used to call them back home, where you go and buy, you don't actually drink there, but anywhere that sells alcohol for consumption on the premises, if someone walks in with a firearm, they will then be guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction must be fined no more than $2,000 or in prison no more than 2 years. If that person also holds a concealed weapons permit, the state has the right to revoke it for 5 years, which I, I don't see what that really matters, considering you can just open carry and don't need a permit anymore. So, oh no, you took away my concealed weapons permit. I mean, maybe it affects other places, but not here. So, in any event, there that is a restriction. So, a person cannot come into a business that sells alcohol for consumption on site if they, knowingly walk in with their gun. Um, I love how it says knowingly carried. It gives you an out like, oh, I didn't know I had a gun on me. I forgot. I'm just so used to it. That wording makes me concerned that nothing's ever going to come of this. Now, it also allows open carry in private businesses and churches only if allowed by the property owner. So any private business and any church can say, no, we don't allow guns here. But if they're cool with it, yeah, you can just waltz into a church with a gun. Now, the part about tougher penalties that McMaster has been trying to push is that for people who do not have a permit and are caught carrying where it is prohibited, there will be some tougher penalties for them. So even though you don't have to get a permit, it might behoove you to do it for several reasons, including safety training things, of course. But also, if you do something you shouldn't be with the gun and you don't have a permit, you'll get a tougher penalty than someone that does have one. I think it's funny, not funny, but in the sad way that we have these same legislators saying like, oh, we don't need hate crime legislation because the crime is already illegal. What does it matter if why are we adding something tougher on it and making it more illegal? In their words, this is the same idea. If it's already illegal to do something, why are we making it quote unquote more illegal? It's the hypocrisy. You guys get it. So in any event, there's another key portion of this bill that involves repeat offenders obtaining firearms. It includes increased penalties for people who illegally carry, like felons who possess any guns, despite being legally barred from doing so. So again, there's some enhanced penalties. That McMaster's been trying to say this will stop the revolving door of criminals, which is kind of silly because it's a much bigger problem than that. It also has to do with judges and lenient sentences and plea deals and things like that. So I'm not convinced that this is actually going to lower crime in any way, shape, or form. It will likely lead to an increase, as anyone can have guns now for the most part. Don't have to get any training. You're going to see, unfortunately, some accidental shootings of some kind, I'm sure, as people are not properly trained. Again, hopefully responsible gun owners, if they have kids or whatever who turn 18, they'll be teaching them these safety things. That's the hope. But can you really bank on that? So I'm not optimistic. This sounds like a terrible idea. We've been talking about that for a long time. But it will be law. Henry McMaster will be signing this, barring some ridiculously unseen circumstance. So again, get ready. Anyone over the age of 17, so 18 or older, anyone in the state of South Carolina, assuming they're not a convicted felon, and there's a couple other small restrictions, but anyone can just buy a gun, doesn't need any training, doesn't need any permit, and they can just openly carry it just about anywhere in this state. All right, an update on that situation out on Sullivan's Island where the police chief had resigned. There was some controversy. We finally have gotten some more details about that. Specifically, News 2 had a report. They obtained some documents that revealed that there were multiple complaints against the former Sullivan's Island police chief, Chris Griffin, and these complaints spanned over several years. Griffin had been on the Sullivan's Island police force since 1997, and he was ultimately appointed police chief in 2018. So the first incident took place back in November of 2019 at a South Carolina Police Chiefs Association annual leadership conference. This was taking place in Myrtle Beach. According to the file, Griffin approached two women and asked them for their numbers so he could send them what he thought were funny memes and images. Apparently, the women gave them their phone numbers, and then a lawsuit that came out of that showed that Griffin sent the women almost 20 unanswered and unprompted messages at that time when he was at that conference, and then followed up by asking, "Do you like any of those? LOL." The images, which were provided as screenshots in the Freedom of Information Act documents that News 2 obtained, appeared to be sexually explicit, racist, demeaning, and inappropriate. This is all according to that lawsuit as well. Another complaint happened when Charleston Fire Department Chief Dan Curria filed a complaint against Griffin in March of 2020 following an incident that took place at the scene of a crash on I-526 2 days prior. So Griffin, who had not been dispatched to the scene, nor was it within his jurisdiction, as he's in Sullivan's Island, and this was city of Charleston, Griffin was asked to not approach the scene because one of the people involved in this accident may have COVID. They were showing symptoms of it. This is March 2020. This is like very early, as you may remember. We knew next to nothing about COVID at that time. So he randomly shows up at this accident scene. It's not his jurisdiction. He wasn't asked to be there. He just randomly shows up. He's told not to approach the scene because the person who is now being treated by EMS may have COVID. But Griffin replied that he did not care because that person was one of his employees. And then he, shouted out some expletive at fire personnel. Real classy act here. According to Fire Chief Curria, Griffin entered the person's vehicle without any protection and removed items and a car seat. They said his reckless actions potentially contaminated the accident scene and noted that Griffin knowingly violated 2 lawful orders to not enter the area. Just completely absurd behavior. But that's not all. Multiple complaints were filed against Griffin by personnel from the Sullivan's Island Police Department itself, and these were regarding derogatory and sexually explicit comments and inappropriate behavior. These all stem from last year, 2023. One complaint filed in late December reflected on an incident that happened following a high-speed chase that took place on August 25th and ended at Breach Inlet. According to the complaint, Griffin approached 2 employees and showed them a photo of a woman and asked them if they could guess her age. They guessed, and Griffin replied that she was 50 and asked if they were into MILFs. So there's a high-speed chase. Not that this is appropriate to ever do with coworkers, but it's a high-speed chase, and instead of doing, police work, he's asking people to guess the age of a woman in a photo and then asking them if they like MILFs. Oy, oy, oy. Griffin said he traveled to Florida to meet up with the woman in the picture, and described their encounter, saying he wished he had filmed it because the woman was, quote, quite a freak, end quote. Again, just wildly inappropriate behavior with coworkers, and would obviously be wildly inappropriate behavior in other circumstances as well, but specifically in this situation. The patrol officer who filed the complaint stated that she had just been informed this is a completely different complaint. So there's a patrol officer. So the last one is all done. Here's another one. This person stated she had been informed that she would be hired by the department, but she was still working for the Isle of Palms Police Department. So one day she was not feeling well and said Griffin kept contacting her saying she could come over to his house and lay on the couch so that he could take care of her. After she started working for the agency, so that was before she had made the transition to work for Sullivan's Island. He is her boss, or going to be her boss, or superior, and he's saying that she can come over and lay on his couch and he'll take care of her, which, again, just bizarre behavior. So then when she started working for the police department, she said they were going through the uniforms that belonged to a previous female officer to see if she could use any of the items. The documents in the complaint said she tried on a Sullivan's Island Police Department t-shirt to wear under her uniform, and then Griffin commented on her chest. The employee alleged many other concerning comments made by Griffins. For instance, in another case, the employee said she was told to give Griffin her locker combination because, quote, everything in the police department was police property and he had to have access, end quote. After that, random items like toys and stuffed animals started to appear in the locker room. The employees suspected they were placed there by the department's fleet manager, a man named Tom McClellan, but she believed he was placing them there at Griffin's direction. So again, just bizarre, weird behavior. There's another complaint that was filed on December 19th, 2023 by an employee who had an issue with things Griffin said about her and other employees. In one such situation, she described comments about what Griffin thought she would do in bed and asked inappropriate questions about her fiance. Unreal. I feel like I've been talking about complaints for like an hour against this guy. So, we knew there was some kind of investigation going on and he was put on leave. Ultimately decides to resign, so you knew it must have been pretty serious. He was probably on his way to be fired and decided to resign instead. And now, thanks to the Freedom of Information Act request by News 2 and other outlets at this point, we're starting to see this insane amount of complaints against the former police chief. He definitely does not need to be in that role or involved in public service. If he acts like this, he shouldn't have any job anywhere. Just insane that he thought any of this was appropriate and that it would never come back, and bite him in the ass. And it sure did. So yeah, good riddance to that guy. That'll do it for this Friday edition of Holy City Center Radio. Sorry, we're talking about everyone can have guns and the wild actions of a former police chief in the area. So, not the most uplifting of shows. I apologize, but, sometimes that's the way it is. Try to forget it. Get out there and enjoy your weekend. I'll be back on Monday. Monday's show will be an interview. No news updates. So if anything happens between now and then, I won't be talking about it on Monday's episode. We have a great interview for you, which will start Monday off and next week off on a much better foot. So you'll enjoy that episode. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so that you don't miss that show or any ones after it. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio, and Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. And of course, thank you to all of you for listening. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to vote in Best of Charleston. I will talk to you all again next week. Until then, good night and good luck.